I was a big Modi Bhakt. I really believed that he.
Why did you admire him in the way that you did, and what changed for you?
I wrote against him when the Gujarat riots happened, but I felt that he had been treated unfairly because what happened in Gujarat had happened 1,000 times over in secular times by secular parties.
When you liked Sonia, in the days that you were their friend, what did you like about her?
She was very generous and very warm, and if she gave you her friendship, she really gave it. She was very, very generous with Atish.
She sent your son clothes.
Oh yeah, she would bring them from Italy, and she dropped me because I did a profile of her in India Today. And I've written that story very often, where Arun Puri said to me, he said, I don't mind being considered a chamcha of Rajiv Gandhi, but I'm not going to be considered a chamcha of Sonia.
When people say, and they often say, Tavleen, you're obsessed with Sonia. You've heard that. There's something personal there's something visceral there. You're obsessed with her. And I think you at one point said that she has been, in a way, in the UPA years, a de facto prime minister.
She was. There's no question about that. There was no question at all about that. Now they say that I'm obsessed with Narendra Modi.
I'll come to the state of journalism in a bit, but I want to talk a little bit about what's happened with Atish Taseer, your son. But before we come to the fact that he can no longer come to India and visit you, at least at the moment, let's talk about that time that you brought him up as a single mother. Sonia Gandhi used to send clothes for Atish,
Yes.
that Vasundhra Raje, who was then a very close friend of yours, used to help you financially, your mother used to help you financially.
I'm ready on this program to say that may they be cursed for what they did.
How many times did you meet Bhindranwale?
I can't remember. Many times.
Did you ever think he would kill you? Why would you not be more empathetic about women who are speaking about sexual harassment?
If a woman who is over the age of 18 willingly goes to a man's bedroom, she knows what she's doing. And I think that, you've got to be more balanced about that.
One of the most used and abused phrases in our political lexicon was coined by you. I don't know how many people know Lutyens Delhi, the idea of Lutyens Delhi. What does it actually mean to you?
Well, at that point that it was going, I grew up in Lutyens Delhi. That my grandfather was one of the contractors who built Lutyens Delhi. So when the whole conversation began about Modi coming to Delhi, I actually wrote a piece in my column saying that the people living inside Lutyens Delhi were shaking with fear at the thought of him coming because he was a total outsider. He was the kind of person that they couldn't co-opt to this very cozy little space where the rulers of India lived like princes. And, the world didn't know about it. And so he sent for me, Modi, to Ahmedabad. And he was delighted with the piece. So, I got a call the next day saying, Narendra Modi wants to see you. So, I was quite pleased. And that's how it began. But, it's now acquired a totally different thing. Lutyens Delhi is occupied by him and his men.
So it's a new Lutyens?
Absolutely. It's the old lot, poor things, are, not in Lutyens Delhi anymore. And also, I always objected to the fact that that it should be government housing in the most expensive part of Delhi. And it's a very bad example to set for the rest of the country, because even when you travel, you see that in a small town, the only street that is clean and has trees, etc., will be where the collector, the police chief, and where the high officials live. So I really, I object to that kind of thing. We shouldn't be paying for our officials, our MPs, to live like kings when they can't provide housing to ordinary people.
Are you Lutyens Delhi, new or old?
I am old Lutyens Delhi, And I have a little property in Lutyens Delhi because, my mother inherited it. But, I don't like Lutyens Delhi as it is now.
But it's a metaphor. It's not just a physical
Yeah.
or a geographical description. And the metaphor was of an old elite, challenged by a new elite. Do you see yourself as part of, certainly you were part of the old elite. Do you see yourself as part of the new elite?
No, it's completely closed to me, the new elite. I don't have any access at all.
Why did that happen, you think?
I think that when, I was a big Modi Bhakt. I really believed that he
Why did you admire him in the way that you did, and what changed for you?
I wrote against him when the Gujarat riots happened, but I felt that he had been treated unfairly because what happened in Gujarat had happened 1,000 times over in secular times by secular parties. For me, one of the worst incidents, other than the Sikhs, which I actually was witness to, was the Hashimpura incident. And all of these things, in that, what happened, the what is it called, the PAC?
And it was on the watch of the PSC that all of this happened.
No,
I mean,
the
police.
PSC
The police led it.
It was I don't know what
The
it's called.
provincial armed
Or
constabulary.
whatever.
Yes.
They arrested Muslims in Meerut, in the Hashimpura area, put them, and the youngest was 13 years old, the oldest was 70, put these men into a van and shot into the van. And, I couldn't believe that such a thing could happen in India. If a couple of them hadn't survived, because they threw the bodies into the canal after that, the Ganga Canal goes by, and one or two of them survived and ended up in the medical institute. And I actually met them and heard about this incident. I mean, it was like a Nazi-style shooting. And who was Prime Minister? Rajiv Gandhi. Who was Prime Minister when the Sikhs were massacred in Delhi? Rajiv Gandhi justified it. So I felt that a lot of people, including maybe you, were unfair to him.
In what way?
Well, you made it sound as though it was the first time that this had happened since 1947, and it certainly wasn't.
Do you think, looking back, that impression that people took away was because it was the first time a riot had actually been chronicled on television?
Yeah. It was the first.
Because I don't think anyone set out or, to do anything but to report the story. I was certainly, a young reporter in my 20s, just telling the story that I was assigned to report. But it was the first time. I don't know what impression 1984 would have been created had it been captured on TV news.
I agree with you. But there was almost no reportage of 1984 in the print media. You had to actually get people to allow you to do a story on what happened to the Sikhs. I remember a year later going to Tilak Nagar, where the widows were, and they were openly cursing Rajiv Gandhi and wishing him, doom and death and things like that, because they hadn't been helped at all. And nobody was prepared to listen to their stories. Now, I admit that there wasn't television, but there was journalism. There were journalists who did not report that story.
What is the image that stays with you from 1984?
I remember for a start that, I was writing for the Sunday Times London. And they, of course, thought that Punjab was going to erupt. And so they sent me off to Amritsar. She was killed on the 31st of October. On the 1st, they sent me off. And I had to leave Atish, who was, I think, 3 or 4 years old. And, I spoke to my mother and I said, can you come and stay with him? Because he's alone. I was in a little Barsati and golf links at that point. And she said, nothing's going to happen. You don't understand India, it never happens like that, etc. I then come back from Amritsar that evening, and the image has stayed with me because my grandmother faced the same thing in Lahore when they had to flee. And I smelt burning, it wasn't like burning flesh, but burning as I came out of the airport. And there was this smoke coming in from the rest of Delhi, and I couldn't find a taxi. I couldn't go in. And at that point, I used to wear a khanda, a gold khanda. And, it's that's identifiably a thing. And so I somehow managed to persuade South Indian gentleman to give me a lift to to Rafi Marg, where the office of the telegraph was, or, wherever. And on the way outside the Ashoka Hotel, we saw the first burnt bodies in the street. Then we saw taxis with, dead men, on the thing. And I couldn't believe that this was in the center of Delhi and there were bodies in the streets.
Yeah.
That I've never been able to forget. I sometimes have nightmares of that. And then we went the next day after that. On the 3rd, Rajat Sharma and I went to Tirlokpuri, and we saw what we thought was just garbage burning, and they were bodies. And he remembers a foot, and I remember an arm, of somebody with a ring on it, or the other way around, I can't remember. But,
I think you wrote it was an arm with a ring on it.
Yeah.
A hand stretched out with a ring on it.
And he remembers the foot. And, we were in shock, I have to tell you. Those are the images that stay with me.
So let's start with Rajiv Gandhi, on whose watch this happens. You liked Rajiv Gandhi. You were friendly with his wife, Sonia. You write about this friendship and how it went sour in your book, Darbar. When you liked Sonia, in the days that you were their friend, what did you like about her?
She was very generous and very warm. And if she gave you her friendship, she really gave it. She was very, very generous with Atish.
She sent your son clothes.
Oh, yeah, she would bring them from Italy and pretend that they were for Menika's son and say, oh, no, he's too big because I think he's a year older than Atish. So she's a very generous woman. And, I must tell you this, that I admire very much that she became the most important politician in India. She couldn't speak Hindi when Rajiv was killed. She had no idea who was in the Congress party. She had no idea of how to conduct an election, nothing. And look where she got. She became and remains actually one of the 10 most powerful politicians in India. So I admire her. So, I have no hostility to her.
Then who do you have the hostility to?
I don't have any hostility, Barkha. I'm a journalist. I report what I see. I have no... Yeah. She dropped me because I did a profile of her in India Today. And I've written that story very often, where Arun Puri said to me, he said, I don't mind being considered a chamcha of Rajiv Gandhi, but I'm not going to be considered a chamcha of Sonia, because she actually gave me all the information that we needed as an interview on the telephone and, agreed with... But
so she knew you were doing the story on her?
Yeah, it was done with her permission. She didn't give a full interview because Manishankar Iyer advised against it. But she actually, on a personal level, gave me the interview, telling me what she did in her spare time. That's what Arun Puri said. We want to do a profile of her because we don't even know what she sounds like. And she's everywhere with the Prime Minister. And, we don't know what she does in her spare time. We don't know the kind of music she likes. So go and ask her. So it was all of that stuff. But Dilip Bob was put on the job with me. And to make it sound like I wasn't really being a chamchi, I put in one line saying you can either be Lalita Shastri or Raisa Gorbachev. And that was one line that she objected to. The other line that she objected to I said her friends using her name. And they were, in every drawing room in Delhi, there was the Kotrokis saying, what can we do for you? How could we help? And it wasn't just them.
And for a generation that's too young to know who the Kotrokis are, they're the family that then eventually gets linked to the Bofors scandal.
Exactly. The money from the Bofors bribes was found in their personal accounts. Now, why would an armaments company bribe a fertilizer salesman unless he could really help them swing that deal, right? She's never actually they've never traced the money to her because maybe she didn't actually get it, maybe other people did. But, in any case, she objected to those two things. And then when I write about this, when she, I tried to see her, I said, I'll come and tell you the names. And she, after that, she never, all access was dropped.
How did you feel about that?
I felt very bad about losing, because I liked Rajiv to the end. And then Louise and Salman Khurshid said, you've got to try and resolve this with Rajiv. And so they were living opposite 10 Janpaths in a house, and it was Eid or it was Ramzan, and there was Iftar, and Rajiv was coming. So this was just like maybe 2 weeks before he was killed. And I said to him, I said, Rajiv, what is the problem? I'm criticizing the Prime Minister of India or, Rajiv, the politician. What's that got to do with personal things? He said, I have no personal problems. So I said, so can I come to interview in Amethi then? He said, please do. And so I went there, and again, she tried to stop it. She was at the airport, I arrived with a television crew, and she said, she was cold as ice, and I don't know how I managed to get the interview finally, but I did, and that was the last time I saw him.
What do you think there's, from your time that you knew both of them well, what is the one thing about the Gandhi family that you think people don't know, but you got a chance to observe?
Well, I didn't know Indira Gandhi.
I mean Rajiv Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi.
I think that there's a decency in their personal dealings with humans, with
others,
even with their dogs. There's a decency underneath the. Certainly, Rajiv was a very decent human being. I think that he was a terrible politician, and I think actually Sonia has been a more successful politician. So I think that really the decency is what people don't often see. But, I don't know the children, so I don't know whether they have it.
When people say, and they often say, Tavleen, you're obsessed with Sonia. You've heard that. There's something personal there's something visceral there. You're obsessed with her. And I think you at one point said that she has been, in a way, in the UPA years, a de facto prime minister.
She was. There's no question about that. There was no question at all about that. Now they say that I'm obsessed with Narendra Modi. I met somebody the other day who said, your column is just garbage because all you're doing is attacking Modi, and Modi has done so much for India. So, it goes with the territory. I actually try to be as honest as I can about what I'm writing or, what I'm saying. And, I feel quite disappointed that people think it's personal.
There's a photograph of you presenting one of your books to Prime Minister Modi. And clearly at that time, you are still, I'm not saying that you only present books to people you admire. In public life, as a journalist, we meet all people from all walks of life. But you clearly did on record admire him. You
Absolutely.
were a Modi fan.
Yes. I still am, actually.
You are still a Modi fan?
Yes. I believe that he has done a great deal for India in the past 9 years. I don't like some of the things that he's done, but in general, I see when I travel villages that now have toilets in their homes, in village homes. I see roads in villages. I see women who, in the deserts of Rajasthan, you will find women with gas cylinders. So he's done a lot for India in that way. Look at the infrastructure that's being built. I've never seen this scale of improvement. So I admire all that, but I don't admire the divisions he's created in India, and I find them very dangerous. So,
what was the turning point for you when you moved from being an admirer to being what is how would you describe your
I think the killing of Akhlaq started it. I think that was 2016.
Yeah.
Just before demonetization. I began to think, my goodness, he doesn't understand economics at all. But politically, when that happened, after it happened, like maybe a few days later, and I was in with the whole RSS lot, and I went and saw a very senior RSS leader, and I said, "Why don't you say something?" I said, "आप कुछ बोलो, कुछ कहो कि ये गलत हुआ है." He said, "भाई हिंदू कम से कम मारना सीख गए हैं." And I was quite taken aback, and I actually recounted this to other BJP, and I said, "This is wrong. I mean, you cannot support this kind of thing." So that actually began the disenchantment, because I actually don't want to see India divided again. My family is a victim of partition. I don't think that it's right to believe that it's possible to have any kind of final solution for the Muslim question, because there are too many Muslims and they didn't come from anywhere else. They're Indians. And so that is what is worrying me the most.
Have you met with the Prime Minister after you began criticizing him? When was the last time you met him?
The last time I met him was on Independence Day, August 15th. They have that little ceremony
in Rashtrapati Bhavan or
in Rashtrapati Bhavan, but in that annex in Rashtrapati Bhavan. And so, we were all standing in line. There was me and Kumi Kapoor and a few other people, and, with other journalists. And he was very, charming to Kumi and virtually ignored me. And then immediately after that, there was an India Today conclave where Kali had a little separate, Kali Puri had a photo session. There was Boris Johnson there as well. And they put Ajit and me in that photo. And again, he said to Ajit very charmingly, "Kaise ho Ajit bhai?" And ignored me as if I wasn't there.
And did you say anything?
Well, I did. Namaste. What is there to say? I mean, you can't drop the Prime Minister of India. He has to drop you.
And you've been dropped?
I've been dropped twice.
By Sonia Gandhi and Narendra Modi.
Yeah.
Do you wear that as a badge of honor, or do you feel a bit bad about both of it?
Well,
both of them.
I really think that people in India do not understand the role that journalists play.
Yeah.
Now, for the journalism that I have understood is that our relationship with the government has to be adversarial. We're not meant to be cheerleaders. And, it's very worrying that most of the media at the moment have turned into cheerleaders.
Yeah.
So, all I was doing was my job in both cases, and I got chucked.
I'll come to the state of journalism in a bit, but I want to talk a little bit about what's happened with Atish Taseer, your son. But before we come to the fact that he can no longer come to India and visit you, at least at the moment, let's talk about that time that you brought him up as a single mother. You wrote in your Indian Express column, when you spoke about the fact that his OCI card had been cancelled, that you would not advise any woman to be a single mother. You spoke about, in that column, I actually read that Sonia Gandhi used to send clothes for Atish, yes. That Vasundhra Raje, who was then a very close friend of yours, used to help you financially. Your mother used to help you financially, and they were terribly tough years. One, you were a single mother. Two, you were a single mother to a child whose father was Pakistani and a very well-known Pakistani. What was that phase like?
Hard, because I was actually covering Punjab and Kashmir. That was my beat.
Yeah.
And in Punjab, after, was it Black Thunder, the second operation that they thought that I'd identified, what was his name? Jinda? No, the Delhi terrorist who was leading the whole...
Oh, yeah, I forget his name.
Jinda, whatever, one of those stupid Punjabi names. And anyway, I had actually gone into the Golden Temple.
Yeah.
And they, I was I was encouraged to go in by the CRPF who wanted to know what was going on inside. So I became a victim of this thing. And I was at the farthest point from the exit when suddenly these bells started going and I thought ceasefire is over. And I couldn't get out. So I saw these guys, Pinta, I think his name was, and they actually said to me, "Come, aao sade naal, assi itthe luke hoye ne," and they were in one of the bungas. And they took me there and I chatted to them. And I said, "Kar kyun rahe ho?" We had a chat. And then after that, when they were forced to surrender by that strategy of KPS Gill, of actually starving them out. He came out, and I was with an India Today photographer next to me, Prashant Panjwani.
Panjwani, yeah.
And Prashant said to me like that, pointing to him, and I said, I mean, it was just a gesture. We didn't even speak. And 2 minutes later, he took cyanide.
Wow.
And killed himself. So then after that, I was under these death threats. And, I went to Bhakt Singh, who was Home Minister at the time. And I said, how can you help me with this?
And Atish was born at this time?
Atish was at that point 7 years old.
Okay.
And he said, you've just changed the route that your son goes to school and all this. So, there were times when I thought, I'm going to be killed with Atish. And so, that was very difficult. And I was living with my mother, with whom, she's a difficult woman. She loves Atish, but I've had a very difficult relationship with her. So, I was obliged to, to actually try to protect him from my
And
journalist.
you weren't called anti-national because you had an affair with a Pakistani?
No, at that point, it was not considered such a bad thing to do. It was perfectly normal. I have many Pakistani friends to this day. It's only now that we've started to think of Pakistanis as demons. At that point, it wasn't such a big problem. It was for my parents, and
Because you came from a Fauji family.
and I also come from a
And
Delhi
Punjab.
family.
And Punjabi, all of that.
My grandmother refused to meet him. Refused absolutely.
The him is Salman Taseer.
Yeah. My mother insisted on having a little kind of reception where she called all her family, who'd gone to school in HSN and all that. So they kept saying, who is this man? Because there was a kind of a marriage, I don't call it a real marriage because I don't think it ever was. But there was a reception here, and within minutes of they were ringing their friends in Lahore and saying, "Kaun hai banda?" Because they didn't know him. And then once the news came to Pakistan, Salman somehow thought that he could have two lives. One with me and one with his. He couldn't actually marry me legally. Even if he had married me, it would have been illegal because in Pakistan you need your first wife's permission, and they were in the process of a divorce, and no Pakistani politician can have an Indian wife. So but it was kind of complicated situation.
But I'm thinking of you. This is what, the 80s?
Atish was born in 1980.
So late 70s,
Yeah.
beginning of 80s, as a woman in media, having an affair with a Pakistani, becoming a single mom, this couldn't be the convention. Were you judged? Did you feel judged? And did you feel bitter? Did you hold your head later and say, oh my God, not Atish, of course, but did you look back at that relationship and look at it as a mistake, or did you just look at it as a part of life?
I was in love. You fall in love, and what's wrong?
But you look back at love differently also sometimes.
I was very disappointed that Salman was such a coward about the whole thing, and that he didn't actually acknowledge that Atish was there until Atish was forced him into this. When he was 21, he went to Pakistan for the first time.
Yes,
and
wrote about it,
and
moving.
sought him out. And wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
Atish can never keep any secrets. That's the big problem. I warn you, never tell him anything that you don't want the whole world to know. And anyway, so,
no bitterness? No bitterness?
No. I don't have that in my... I don't believe that you should be bitter
Did you keep in touch with him? Did you co-parent Atish at some point when he finally acknowledged? Well, Atish was quite old then, 21, I think.
Yeah, no, Atish got on very well with him, and he's very close to his sister, who lives now in Scarsdale, New York. Very close to both his sisters, and they went on holidays together and everything like that. But I was not, I was already with Ajit, and I never actually. I saw Salman maybe once after that. And that was also just because Benazir Bhutto, there was a coup, and he tried to ring me and say, let's meet in the evening. And I thought, oh, no, this is too much. So, no, I never saw him.
Vasundhra Raje helping you through this period, a very close friend, did not remain a close friend?
Vasu has been, again, it's a complicated story. She was very bitter about Atish writing about her. He did a book called Temple Goers, in which there's a Maharani type figure, and but after that she forgave him, and he said, Vasumasi, I'm not going to apologize to you because you make a great literary character. So she was quite flattered, and we went off to this Satguru's ashram together after Salman was killed, and everything was okay until the problem with politicians and politicians who are royals is that they're very kaan ka kacha. And there was a group of people around her who kept poisoning her about, I mean, we have distances, but I still think of her with friendship, I mean.
And she stood by you in tough times?
Yes.
What was the toughest thing about being a single mother?
The money. I never earned enough to be able to, if I didn't have the help of Vasu, my sister, other people, it was financial.
And today, to not be able to see your son because he's being described as a Pakistani and therefore the rules are different, have you learned to cope with it?
I think what has happened to Atish is horrible. It is, it's one of the things that should happen to nobody. Because for a start, the whole thing, they're lying, and now they lie about it openly on social media. The story is that when he turned 18, before that, he lived his entire life in India. When he turned 18, I went to the Khan market, the FROC, whatever it is, the Foreigners Registry. And I said, Ji, ab visa iska kya kare? They said, Ji, PIO bana do. I said, wo kya hota hai? And they said, Ji, person
of Indian origin. Oh.
And they asked me for his father's name, etc. And I gave everything. I said his father's name and, the whole works. And at that point, I don't think there was this Pakistani rule. And then in 2016, he rang me and said, they're asking what nationality Salman was. And I said, say British, because I think he had 2 passports. He was half English. And, he used to come in and out of London and buy property and stuff. So and Pakistanis are allowed 2 passports. So I said, say British if they're saying, you can't be Pakistani. And he did. And that's what they're saying. Oh, he lied about it. And, now you have people like Sambit Patra on Twitter. I wish I had the money to sue him, saying that he was a trained ISI agent.
Did he say that?
On Twitter, there's a tweet. Trained ISI agent. I mean, for goodness sake. Because that means that I am an ISI agent, right?
You didn't go to court against this order. You didn't think you could win?
Atish did go with the help of some of his friends who were lawyers, etc. But they said, you'll never be able to win.
So how do you meet him?
I have to go to, I have to find ways to meet him. So I have to go to New York, which is a very expensive proposition. And so I see him like maybe 2 weeks in the year. But what is very sad is that my mother is really, she's 93. And she sort of semi-brought him up because, when we were living with her and I used to go on my travels, etc., she would look after him. And so he's the kind of, my sister's going to kill me and my nephews and nieces. But he was the favorite grandchild because he'd lived with her so long.
Yeah.
And so you can't mention his name. She almost doesn't know who I am. But she'll say, how's Atish? Where's Atish? And then she, bursts into tears. So, it's a terrible thing that they've done. And I'm ready on this program to say that may they be cursed for what they did. May people who think, and all those trolls who revel in this, and say, oh, go and meet your Pakistani son, and, he's a terrorist, a jihadi. This is a new trick that they've got, is they malign you so much on social media that there's an army, you can't answer all of them. You can't even block all of them.
You try to call people for help and intervention when this happened. Nobody helped?
Nobody helped. I don't want to mention names, but important BJP people, and they said no. And he doesn't even get a tourist visa. I'm trying for him to just be able to. He has an American passport and a British passport. How can you deny him a tourist visa? What is he going to do if he comes here? Blow the country up?
You spoke of how you never had enough money raising Atish as a single mom. Obviously, journalism didn't pay quite well in those days. Not that it evenly does now. I think a few people get a lot of money, but most journalists still continue to do this from passion, especially in the smaller towns of India. I read one very moving account of you on a reporting trip to Sri Lanka, where the road is mined, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm 44 years old. Do I really want to blow my life up for this assignment? Who will look after my son? And then you say, at some point, every journalist stops being a reporter because they get scared. Is it that as we get older, we get more scared of dying? Or is it something else?
You get scared. I mean, I'd been in many situations where I could have been killed. But in Sri Lanka that day, it was, the whole thing was very weird. You sometimes have these kind of strange things happen in your head. So as I closed the suitcase before I was going off towards Batticaloa, where the fighting was, in Colombo, in the Taj Hotel or whatever, as I was closing, I said, when they find this, let me pack properly. And what am I thinking? Yeah. And then we stopped in Anuradhapura on the way to, Batticaloa. And I had a Sinhalese driver. And I said, are you sure it's okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. And then we had this, that delicious beef salad, beef curry that they make with appams, etc. And I thought, it's my last breakfast. And, I started feeling it, I started getting nervous. And the driver continued. We continued literally to within 10 kilometers of Batticaloa. And then we saw these people fleeing and in trucks. And they said, don't go, it's terrible. And I was so relieved. And after that, I thought, I better stay out of war zones.
Did you think Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale would kill you at some point? And again, for the context of our younger viewers, he was, of course, one of the most dreaded terrorists of his time, created, ironically, again by the Congress government of the time, by Indira Gandhi, and so on. You did some absolutely stellar work from the field on Punjab. How many times did you meet Bhindranwale?
I can't remember. Many times.
Did you ever think he would kill you?
The last time I met him, I thought we were in danger because Sandeep Shankar and I were up there, and I've said this before. The story is a strange one. I came back from a dinner party and I was wearing a mukesh ka dupatta and chamkila salwar kurta, and Cable Saab was sure that there was going to be Blue Star was happening the next day. So we literally didn't even have time. I didn't have a toothbrush. I bought it on the way there. And I was the only woman. He was holding a meeting on the langar, in the Golden Temple on the chat of the langar on the terrace. And suddenly he noticed me. I was not inconspicuous. And he sent for me. And he said in Punjabi, where he never spoke any other language, he said, Bibi Ethia, calling me right to the front. And everyone was armed. Everyone had machine guns and whatever, automatic weapons. And he said, Tu hi hai na, jisne likhya si ki tanu Sikh hone te sharam aandi hai. I'd written a column.
And why had you said that?
When I first went there, I came back and I said, this is not the Sikhism that I was brought up with.
Right.
And I did a column, and that got translated into all the Punjabi papers, etc. And I thought, my God, I've had it. Because, for a start, it was really on the verge of and the Golden Temple was completely fortified at that point. And I got out of it by saying, "Nahi main likhya si ke Darbar Sahab de andar inne hatiyar dekh ke mainu sharam aayi hai." And he said, "Hatiyar rakhan da haq hai. Guru Gobind Singh ne sanu ditta." I said, "Is tarah de hatiyar." And then he got off, flounced off, and went away. And Sandeep said, Tavleen mar gaye. And I said, inko sabko nikalne do, hum baad mein jayenge. So we waited for all these young men to go down. And then at the bottom of the stairs when we walked down, Harminder Singh Sandhu, who was one of his lieutenants, said to me, he said, "You're very lucky that you're a Jat Sikh woman." He said, "We don't kill Jat Sikh women."
Oh.
At that point, they weren't killing Jat Sikh women. So I suppose I got saved for caste reasons.
When you saw sort of the Amrit Pal story, who sort of molded himself, at least in a sartorial way, to be the next Bhindranwale, you said that you felt there were shadows of the past and the same mistakes might be made. Do you feel that we understand everything with what happened? Who was this Amrit Pal Singh? Where did he come from? What was his story? He certainly ran a private militia. We have the pictures. He certainly surrounded himself with men who were armed with automatic guns. What did you make of that whole episode?
I don't think he had any support on the ground. But, and, I'm actually very puzzled. I don't want to make allegations. But I just hope that he wasn't put there by someone. Because, it's very mysterious. They arrest his driver. They arrest everyone around him. And not him. And also what is very puzzling is, as his father has gone on record to say, if they wanted to arrest him, they could have come here last night. He was here.
Yeah.
Why did they allow him to come out in a procession and all that sort of business? So, there's something that we don't know about this story. And I'm very happy that Punjab hasn't exploded. But, was there someone in Delhi who stupidly thought that they could discredit the AAP government in Punjab? I don't know. But it's not good.
In the last few minutes, let's talk a little bit about, you've spoken about some of the challenges, but most of them have been personal. They've been not enough money, danger, and professional danger to life. What about being a woman in journalism at your time? Was it tough?
Yeah, there were very few women in journalism. When I joined the Statesman as a reporter, only men did night duty. There was your mother. There was Usha Rai. I can count them on the fingers of one hand. There was Nandini Singh.
Vikram Chandra's mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was... And in any case, the women in the Statesman did, flower shows and cinema reviews and book reviews and all that. And I said, why can't we, why are you discriminating against us? Why can't we do night duty like the men? And, that was the reason, actually, because men were paid the same as us, I think. But, they did night duty. So we started doing night duty, And so at that point, it was really, we were like pioneers in that thing. And I was the first woman to be given a political column to write.
Fabulous. And then maybe that explains why so many women were surprised when this entire MeToo sort of debate takes place in India. A number of women come out, they take on a number of men in public positions. MG Akbar has to quit on account of how many women actually come out and say that they were harassed by him. And you take a very different position. You and I have an argument at the time. I said something, you wrote a column rebutting me. Obviously, none of it was personal. And I think that's actually the great thing about you, that you're able to disagree in a convivial way, and too few people are. But I want to understand why a pioneer who broke barriers, who was a trailblazer, remains someone who doesn't pull her punches. Why would you not be more empathetic about women who are speaking about sexual harassment?
What I objected to about the Me Too movement, and I actually said then it's going to die because it's an imitation of what's going on in America. And any imitation doesn't work. This is a country in which on a daily basis, children, little girls are raped. Their bodies are found in drains. And, so I feel that the issues in India are different, that the issues, for instance, gathering fuel wood, is a feminist issue in my view. Why do women not raise that? A woman in a village in India still has to go miles to get water. So she can't be educated. The little girls are doing all this sort of work before they're allowed to go to school. They're married off to old men, all that. Those for me are India's real feminist issues. Me Too, I thought, was a small, urban, elitist issue, which is why I objected to it.
Look
And
at
I
the
said
look,
it was
look,
going to
look at
die.
the wrestlers. Look at the wrestlers who are on the pavement at the time that we're recording this conversation. You have Olympians and world champions alleging sexual abuse by a very, very powerful man who also happens to be a member of parliament of the BJP, at least at this moment. Is that elitist?
I'm on their side totally. And they're not saying Me Too. They're saying this is sexual harassment. I'm totally against men, powerful men, sexually harassing someone in the office, or would stand with any woman who had to face that. But I thought the Me Too movement was really just a very small little a copycat movement. And I said then it would die, and it's died.
Let me put it to you a little bit differently. You are quite right in saying that there are millions of Indian women who have basic existential challenges in their daily lives. And I agree with that. But is it either or? Look at the sort of deplorably declining numbers of women who are working today. We have fewer women in the labor force today than we used to at one point. If you, not you, but if institutionally there is a kind of looking the other way from women complaining about harassment at the workplace, do you not think, A, it directly correlates to how many women will want to work? Two, just because their issues aren't existential and everyday, does it make them any less grave?
If the Me Too movement in India had raised both issues, I believe it would have been more credible. They don't raise these other issues. All the big feminists in India don't talk about those women who really faced, who really face existential issues, who are being raped and murdered and all that. So, they didn't do that. They just raised this, it was a group of journalists, actually, the women who made the noise. And also, I thought that, I just thought that there were women who'd got involved in it who were wrongly charging men with, you go up, for instance, no names will be mentioned, to a man's bedroom and then say, oh my goodness, he tried to rape me. I think that's
What
wrong
if you're
about-
forced to come to the man's bedroom
You're
and you
not
think your job
forced.
depends on it?
The women that made all these allegations, they were jumping on a bandwagon. One woman charged Chetan Bhagat, for instance, with, and I think that he may have tried to kiss her or something like that. And, it didn't, the charges didn't stick. But I'm just saying to you that, there were women in this. If a woman who is over the age of 18 willingly goes to a man's bedroom, she knows what she's doing. And I think that, you've got to be more balanced about that.
I'm just questioning you on that word willingly, because if that man is her boss, and she doesn't
meet in the lobby. Anyone can say that.
She doesn't think she has the space to do that. She's scared. It's probably her first job.
Look,
I'm hypothesizing. I'm not talking about anyone
I've been in those situations.
And I was just going to ask you that. Have you faced harassment, bullying at work by a male boss?
Yes, by more than one. And I've faced, as you may have done as well, sources. You go to a man's room in a hotel, and suddenly, he thinks that you're there for some fun. So, I'm in a hotel, when they see you going up in the lift to a man's room, then all the staff down there also think that, so there is all that. But, you can deal with that. I think that it's there. I've dealt with it. I got punished for it. I, lost my job once.
Isn't that harassment?
That was harassment. But you carry on, and I got a better job and moved on.
Okay, we can debate this forever. Let me ask you in the end, if you had to be a journalist today, you're a young woman today studying in college, you're looking
I'm an old woman today.
Let's imagine that you're young, and let's say that you're young even today. But let's say you were a college student today. You're looking at the state of media around you today. Would you still want to be a journalist?
No, because the media That's one of the things that I hold totally against Mr. Modi, and I'm actually surprised that continues to do this. There's a case against the BBC now for that documentary. And, it's very hard to understand why he's thin-skinned. He's being celebrated all over the world as a great leader. At the moment, there is almost no chance of him being defeated next year. So why is he so thin-skinned about the media? And frankly, I've seen journalists, particularly in television, whose bosses I've worked with, etc., and I cannot understand why they've become cheerleaders. I can understand actually Arnab Goswami, because he's not a cheerleader. He is a propaganda channel for Narendra Modi. That I think is fine. But if you're pretending to be doing real journalism and then, cheerleading, that I think the media has never been in more docile and obsequious.
Should we blame Modi for that, or should we blame the media? Is it something else? Is it revenue
No,
models broken? Is it wanting access?
Yeah, the pressure on television channels is huge, as you probably know.
Yeah.
People, you don't get a second job in television if you go against him. But look at the way media trials were held for Aryan Khan, for
Riya Chakrabarti.
And it was the media, it was all on television, deliberately done. That to me is shameful.
I read once that you asked the Prime Minister or someone in his office, why don't you do press conferences?
When I finally met him, when I went to give him my book, India's Broken Tryst, when we were still on good terms, and he's very charming one-to-one, and he gives you so much time. You probably have you interviewed him yourself?
Long back, when in the 1990s.
He gave me a whole year, like an hour. No cell phones are allowed, no aides come in. And he said to me, मैं मीडिया को नहीं समझ पाया, मैं कैसे डील करूं? And I said, आप जैसे व्हाइट हाउस में रोज कोई ना कोई आता है और अमेरिका के राष्ट्रपति के बिहाफ पे बोलता है कि इस इश्यू पे हमारा ये स्टैंड है, ऐसे क्यों नहीं करते आप? और ऐसे क्यों नहीं मिलते आप पत्रकारों से? He says, नहीं, मैं मिलता हूँ. This is what his story was. He said once he gave access to a journalist in Gujarat who said that he was wearing Cartier glasses and designer clothes, etc. And he said, I sent him to my tailor, and the man from whom I bought glasses for the past 50 years, and he said he didn't write the story. So he's very suspicious of the media, and he's harming himself by being suspicious.
How is it hurting him?
How old?
How is it hurting him? I mean, I'm asking a contrarian question as a journalist, but does it really hurt him politically in the age of social media,
yes,
where he can craft his own narrative?
No, it hurts him because internationally there are geopolitical reasons why India is important. It's India that is important. And at the same time, those democracies that are, applauding him for, you talk to them in private, I mean, they say it's an elected autocracy. It's electoral.
But do you agree with the Western broad stroke?
I think that when it comes to these matters, I think they're right. There is a huge pressure in India. There's huge pressure on me. I mean, personally, because I just don't want anyone else in my life harmed because of something I write.
Do you watch? Did you watch what you say? Do you censor yourself?
I have to tell you something. Ajit was targeted by Sonia Gandhi. He was building a city.
Lavasa.
Yeah, that's where the smart city idea came from, right? Modi went there and then said, asked him to come and build one in Gujarat. Sonia closed it down without an environmental assessment done, and he actually had reforested, denuded hills with like 1 million trees, and really put his heart and soul into this city. And she did that, and people say that it's partly because of what I was writing. And at that point, her friends were going around the drawing rooms of Delhi, that when they were still occupying Lutyens Delhi, saying we're going to close this woman's column down. So They were a little bit more subtle, but it was not that different.
So let me ask you this. With your partner in business and your son in exile, do you censor yourself?
Yes, I have to.
So we're seeing a censored version of Tavleen Singh in her columns.
Yes, you're seeing a much more careful version than I would like it to be.
How does that make you feel?
Not so good, but the choice is to give it up altogether, and it's pretty well read. So
It is. In the end, there are these words from your book Darbar that really stayed with me, and I think you mentioned something about the ruling class of India, of which you consider yourself a part, have let this country down. And you said the politicians, I'm summarizing here, it's not the exact language, the politicians have let India down, but you feel so have you as a member of that ruling class. How have you let India down?
We have let India down because the things that we should have been doing, education, public education, healthcare, we knew that we had privileges that were not available to the ordinary Indian, and we didn't give a damn about that. And we knew that we were privileged because we spoke English, but we knew that we could that was keeping out the vast majority of Indians. Modi has sensed that, and we paved the way for Modi.
When you say we, you mean the old Lutyens Delhi.
The old Lutyens Delhi.
We end this conversation where we started. Long may you, Tavleen, offend everybody across ideological trenches, because what would be the fun otherwise?
Well, I'll try.
Thank you.